Here we are. Wonderful Mr. Brian Hodley. Have I pronounced your name appropriately, sir?
You did indeed, sir.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for making the time. Completely appreciate how you and everyone else is incredibly busy, either with work things or, we're in the middle of summer, for crying out loud. And for once in the UK, and my avid listener in Runcorn is very, very jealous because he's in the one place that isn't probably as sunny as it is everywhere else. We're having a proper summer.
Yeah, it's it's a scorcher. I mean, it takes me back to the pandemic, the summer of the pandemic, where
Right.
we couldn't go anywhere. But what an amazing summer we had. Yeah, it's a little too hot. Today's going to be a little too hot for me, I think.
Well, thankfully, I'm not in my studio for other reasons. But look, without further ado, Brian, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into the stuff that you do now? Where did it
My
all begin?
goodness. Well, I guess it depends on which stuff I'm doing now. But I can take you back to, I suppose, the start of a journey. Most of which laid the foundations, I suppose, for where I am today and what I'm doing today. So I grew up in upstate New York, farm country, in the 70s, 80s. So been around for a while. And I read a lot as a kid. Lots of books. See books behind me. Funnily enough, I always wanted to be a writer. So from the time I was really small, the one thing I always wanted to do was write books, which is interesting, given that the trajectory my career ended up taking and where I've ended up. So I've kind of bookended my career with wanting to write and writing. So in the middle, I, interestingly enough, detoured into engineering. So I went to university for electrical engineering.
Okay. I
Yep.
specialize in avionic test systems, so
Did you?
I did an apprenticeship, and the company I was with, British Airways Engineering, they basically gave you a free ride if they deemed it
fantastic.
appropriate, which was awesome. But hey, carry on.
I like meeting other people who started in tech and ended up where we've kind of ended up, just because I think there are a lot of synergies between what we do, and the tech background really gave me a kind of deep dive into working at the edge of things. So when I was when I graduated uni, I got a job with Rochester Telephone in upstate New York, which was one of the oldest independent telcos in the U.S. As a full engineer. So they didn't bring me in as a junior. I was actually the youngest full engineer that they had hired. And the program I'd graduated from, the electrical engineering specialism I took was telecommunications, which at the time was really brand new in terms of degrees in the U.S. So so I went up to Rochester. I had 4 job offers when I graduated, and I took the Rochester Tel one. I ended up working as an engineer in their long distance telecoms team, and spent 2-3 years there before shifting into their cellular team, where I was engineering their upstate New York cellular network. So a mix of tower locations as well as digital microwave shots back to central office locations. So did that for 3-4 years, moved to Boston, worked for a telecoms company in Boston for a couple of years, and again changed to another, a company called Bronner Schlossberg Humphrey, which became Bronner.com, which became Digitas. So I was kind of at the foundational organization that became Digitas later. And it was during that time that I reverted back to my wanting to write books. Ended up applying to Emerson in Boston and got accepted into their grad MFA program. So I actually, since I had some time to kill in between, um,
As you
and
do.
this was, as you do, and this was back in '94, I ended up joining a couple of friends of mine in Boston who started up a web design agency, web dev agency. And so this was '94, and it was very early days. Nobody knew what we were talking about. Every company we approached had absolutely no clue what we were saying. We might as well have been speaking Swahili. And the I spent time with those guys before going to grad school, and then I went to grad school and ended up designing the Emerson College website, as you do, and then more specifically the writing, lit, and publishing section of the site for my uh, my area of the university. Um, and then continued to flip flop. So I graduated. I ended up working for a company called BBN Technologies, doing educational technology, designed, coded, created the content for, wrote the theme tune, sung the theme tune. Um, back in the day, I mean, as you can remember, there was no real division of labor. Quite often you picked up a lot of adjacent skills and ended up doing a lot of things. So I mean, I would say at that point in today's vernacular, I was product managing, I was product designing, I was content designing, I was developing um, you know a central portal for whole school reform in the U.S. For
Mm.
consultants to use and teachers to use in classrooms. So that would have been around '98. And then from there, I kind of, I'll fly through the rest. I ended up moving to London in 2001. I had founded a design agency in Boston in '99, roughly '99 2000. Moved to London 2001. Worked for an agency here. Then ended up founding FunCube, which was a design agency in London. Ran that for 5 years. And then ever since, I've predominantly been freelancing, consulting, contracting, just about every which way, and going in everything from practitioner to fractional interim roles, practitioner all the way up to
Mm. Mm.
head of VP directors, director level roles in design and product. And that's kind of where I stayed for a long time. And then for about the past 12, 14 years, I've been predominantly doing organizational design, change design, transformation design work for digital, I would say digital delivery functions. So everything from strategy through product research, design into engineering. So looking at that entire pipeline. And I've held various roles in that space and done a lot of heavy lifting of teams that were, I would say, in distress over that time. So that's kind of a nutshell when I write books. But we can get to that later.
I mean, going back to, I guess, your passion for reading and also writing, like I can see, you've got the carry there, so behind you. What's your particular poison when it comes to writing? Is there one genre, or are you just greedy, like most of the brilliant people are? And
Y- Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, reading wise, I am greedy. I read across everything. Um, I mean, I was the kid who read cereal boxes, so I think I read if it's got text on it, I read it. In terms of writing, I write urban fantasy novels, and I also am going to be venturing. Well, I once I finish the series I'm currently working on. I'm on the sixth book of that at the moment, final book of it. I have another urban fantasy series I'm going to start, and I've got a crime thriller series I'm going to start. So I'll be splitting my focus between the two.
Wow. So for the uninitiated, urban fantasy, what does that mean exactly?
So it's contemporary. Well, not even just contemporary. It's fantasy that's set in typically urban locations. So in my particular case, it starts off in the Boston area, but it kind of shifts around and travels a bit through time and across worlds. Um, so my series actually spans really urban fantasy, dark fantasy to epic. It becomes kind of epic fantasy by the end. So it's a real mix. But yeah,
Wow. Busy, 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 busy. Which is awesome. I mean, a lot of folks who I'm speaking to, um, there's such a mishmash of, let's call it, different disciplines,
yep.
right? So you might have a particular venting. So mine's obviously music, but I've now gotten into writing a little bit. Um, I bloody love it. It's amazing. You can just
Yeah,
lose yourself in this, self-constructed ecosystem and go nuts. I'm at that stage. Obviously it needs to be finessed and all of that kind of jazz, but um, does that kind of ring any bells for you?
it does. I mean, I think we're in a particularly funny time and have
Mm,
been for probably the past, I don't know, I'd say 6 to 10 years even,
mhm,
where there's been a lot of, global major systemic change. Um, and and I think that's really led to people kind of questioning their values, questioning who they are, questioning what they do, where they live, why they exist. So I think I really genuinely think there's been a lot of why am I doing this? What am I doing? Who am I doing this for?
mhm,
And I think that it's kind of given rise to some of the things that people had on the back burner. Those things that were kind of always, well, one day I'll get around to it.
mhm,
Sorts of things. I think people started. I think probably they escaped into those things initially to survive everything that was going on around them,
uh,
and and then some percentage of those people discovered they had a real passion in those spaces. So so they've turned them into something.
It's a lot of, I guess, exploration and then adaptation, and then if I wanted to UX the damn thing, yeah, you're running through different hypotheses and validating them as you go along, and either it's a set of tasks that pay the bills because that's always important. And if you're lucky, it's a set of tasks that not only pay the bills, but you can flex the things that make you smile.
Yeah, I mean, I think it puts life into perspective. I think, yeah, where I think there was a kind of a deeper focus on career before. Certainly for me, now it's more about, people talk about balance, but when you have something else that you really want to do, suddenly balance becomes a focal point. Like you fight and scrap for every second of time to be able to do that other thing that you love. So I'm in a weird position because I think right now I would say I love what I do in terms of my daytime job. I call it my day job. And I love the writing. So those two things at the moment are sitting in equilibrium. They're sitting in balance for me. And the fact that I've been able to make enough time to do both and focus on both. So I've learned now that all those years of, oh, there's not enough time in the day. you suddenly realize how much time you were throwing away and wasting, sitting around thinking that there's not enough time in the day. And I mean, the fact that I've written and published 5 novels alongside of consulting full time in the
Mm,
last 5 years
mhm.
tells me that there was always time in the day. I just chose to prioritize certain things over other things. So
That whole prioritization thing, do you think that's a natural mm, progression as
um,
we all become older, or should I say more experienced, and we learn about ourselves and what's around us, and then that is funneling what
I
we
think it
actually want to prioritize. Is that happening, do you think?
I think it's probably a mix of two things for me. There's certainly a degree of that, and probably more so now than there was when I started doing this in
Mm.
2020. I started writing again during the pandemic, and I had just finished a head of product and design or director of product and design interim role with a company up in the Midlands, and I had I was going to take a couple of months off anyway because I'd been commuting every week for 14 months and I was exhausted.
That'll do it.
So yeah, it kind of takes it out of you. So the pandemic hit, funnily enough, the lockdown hit a month before I was due to finish. So I spent the last month working from home, and when I finished, I spent a couple of weeks doing nothing really, and of course the pandemic was unfolding all around us, so it was taking up a lot of, I think, headspace and thinking time. And then I kind of realized that, well, I was going to take this time off anyway, and it coincides with the fact that I can leave the house for an hour a day. so so maybe I should do something with that time. And I brushed off something I had been working on. I restructured it, and it was a real shift for me actually at that point because I think I sat down and really consciously focused on it, and I didn't have any other distractions at all.
Mm,
I I kind of developed a methodology that worked for me for my writing. So for years I'd been attempting to write in a in a form that people call in the vernacular pantsing, which is literally seat of the pants, sit down, just start writing, don't have a plot, plot outline, a narrative arc, just
mhm.
write until you finish. Um, and I had a lot of unfinished manuscripts from doing that. But this time I sat down and I actually plotted the book out and chapter by chapter, and I did a high level story arc for the series, and that gave me a framework. And interestingly enough, I used it's funny how your design skills are so transposable.
Mhm.
um, not funny now because I could have done this at any point in my career and didn't. However, I've done it now, so I write about it. I have a site called Indie Author Notes now that is for other independent authors, indie authors. So I share these little nuggets of experience and learning with them on that. But for me, learning, that plotting worked for me, which in retrospect isn't so surprising because in terms of design, I was really strong in UX and information architecture. So ironically, the very things that were my focal point, which probably also go back to my engineering days and the kind of logical, making order out of things by my
Absolutely.
brain, um, they 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 kind of manifested now in my writing, and also I had always walled everything. So I don't know if you've done this, and I know a lot of people I've talked to have done this, where they've said, "Well, I keep that thing separate from that thing," and
Mhm.
so for a long time I kept writing and design separate. I just said these are two separate things; they're not going to meet. And for some reason, I created this artificial barrier between the two.
Yep, yep.
In 2020, when I ripped that barrier down and all of a sudden everything commingled, I suddenly found my whole self, the sum of all my experiences coming to the fore, and suddenly everything clicked and
Did
it
you
started working.
did you find that almost you cared more?
I think I cared more because I wasn't holding everything back.
Mm,
Like I stopped feeling like I was. I think for a long time I kind of felt I felt very divided inside. You know, it's almost
uh,
you kind of you start to feel almost multiple personality. Like I feel like there was my designer consultant personality, and that's who I was there. And then there was Brian as a writer who hadn't quite manifested yet,
uh-huh.
but it was somewhere over there and never the two shall meet. And when they met each other, they found they liked each other, and they found they had a lot in common,
Yep.
and suddenly I just ripped away all of this artifice I think that I'd created, and it's psychological artifice. You build these scaffolds right
Yes.
in your brain,
Absolutely.
and with those gone, I actually could just 100% be me and throw everything I knew had the sum of all my experiences into what I was doing. And that made for me one hell of a difference, I have to say.
Did you find that transition almost turn into a loop? Because and keep me honest here, please. You kind of were doing stuff um pleasure in whichever box, and then it went from pleasure to purpose. And then you kind of go, well, maybe you didn't. I know I didn't, but the universe interjected and it said, you don't need these boxes. It's all one big box. You buffoon, stop it. And then what was a separate, disparate collection of boxes became one big thing. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't pleasure, purpose. It was a combination of both of them. And I can't think of another P word for it, but there you go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the unexpected thing about it, I mean, you know, apart from ripping the barriers down and finding that my design skills supported um, my writing approach,
Mm,
was that also because I was no longer walled and I was able to just think laterally across everything, I suddenly found that I enjoyed the consulting side more. So it wasn't like everything because I wasn't expending so much effort compartmentalizing. I I suddenly could bring all my skills to bear across everything I did. So not just letting design inform writing, but let my creativity inform my consulting and my design. And with those barriers gone, I I suddenly felt I don't know more. I felt more creative. I think overall, it was like I ripped away you know a layer that was holding me down, that was repressing me, and suddenly that was gone, and I could see the sky, and I was like, oh my god, I can do whatever I want. I can do anything I want.
and did your nearest and dearest, and maybe people who had some um, form of opinion of you, did they turn around then and say, "You've changed. You're happier"? What's happened to
Yeah,
you? Was that
I think
noticeable?
Yeah, I think people did notice that. I mean, for one thing, my partner, you know, particularly during the pandemic, really supported my sitting down and writing the books.
Mm, mm.
You know, basically, he said, "This is the time." You know, he's like, if you're ever going to do this, now is it." You know, you have nothing in your way, right? There's nothing stopping you. So, except me, right? So I would have been
Mhm.
at that point the only barrier. So I you know I think I've definitely changed over the last 5, 6 years, in the sense that I move much more fluidly between all the things that I do, and I've grown to become more comfortable with certain things that maybe before I would have found difficult because before I was a lot more on the kind of, you know, introvert end of the introvert extrovert scale. Um, I could pop out and be extrovert in moments, but it required a lot of soothing and healing
On
behind the
the
scenes
edges
to
of that
maintain.
particular distribution. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think now one thing I've done is when you put books out there in the universe, suddenly you have these things called readers. And readers rate you, they comment to you, they comment about you uh,
Uh-huh.
in the third person, and um, and your entire universe is opened up, and you suddenly end up over a period of time finding that you're engaging with lots of people all over the world who uh, you don't know. They only know you through your books, and what you've written, and you've got no control over any of that. It's
Uh-huh.
just out there. Like once you release it, it's in a way not yours anymore. It belongs to the universe at that point. And so I think I've had to spend a lot of time getting comfortable with that kind of exposure. Um, and and that has probably changed me in some way and helped me to be a little bit more comfortable with engaging with people generally, and that shifts into my consulting side. um so I find there's things that have crossed borders in both directions, and so once you take that boundary down, there's nothing stopping learnings from either discipline, either area, from mixing and shifting and shaping and informing. And
Did that weird, I'm using the word weird deliberately, thing called imposter syndrome, how much did that rear its head in I guess, well, did it first of all? Let's start with that.
yeah, I mean, I think most of us can attest to feeling imposter syndrome. And that's across, I would say, anything we do. I I I
Mm,
s- I certainly felt it for a lot of years, consulting, because when you have companies turning to you to come in and do something that they're struggling with doing, everybody's eyes are on you, and it's, I think it's human nature to reach a point where you question, am I am I the right person for this? Do I have the right
uh,
experience for this? Am I going to be able to help them? Um, and that's always, I think that's always sat in the back of my head. With the novels, 100%. You put stuff out there, and this idea of, am I good enough? Is what I'm doing good enough? I think the kicker is you need to get used to getting 1-star reviews.
mhm,
And 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 I read something from, I can't remember who it was, somewhere along the way, a best-selling author that said something to the effect of, when that happens, um, just go on Amazon and look at the reviews for top-selling, best-selling authors around the world, and look at their 1-star reviews, and remind yourself that you're not alone. um, you
mm,
know, everybody gets them. It's a badge of honor to get them, and and it kind of toughens you up in a way. So I think, there's a lot of lessons along the way. It's a bit.
mhm,
I suppose it's a bit like, if you're a designer and you're going into a design critique, and you're showing your work and you get feedback, and the feedback probably ranges from 1 star to 5 star, depending on the day and the work and
mhm,
people's attitudes and who's in the room and all of that. You kind of learn to roll with it over time. So I think some of the things I had learned in one space carried over into another. But some things in the writing space reminded me of, things I needed to be more aware of and conscious of in the consulting space. So yeah.
mm. Yep, 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 yep. That convergence, I think, as you meander your way, not just through life, but if you wanted to segment that, I guess, what is your life made up with, and the timeline progresses, and your priorities, they get more honed. So you bother more about what it is that you actually want to be involved with. And in the Venn diagram of all of that, you're more inclined to actually go, okay, yeah, well, where's the sweet spot here? Yeah. Whereas beforehand, I don't know whether it was a conscious thing or not. Yeah, I'm just going to do everything. Yeah, I can do this. Yeah, we'll have a go at that. Yeah, I can bugger off and I can do a little bit of this. And whether that's geographical or whether that's sector orientated or whether, a hierarchical thing. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And thank you for sharing all of that. That's really, really made me think a lot. A lot. I'm going to rewind. Woof, all the way. What were your favorite toys when you were a rugrat?
God. So don't laugh.
Moi?
So we had this so we had this stream that ran through the back of our property, and there was one section of the stream that kind of branched and split around this little piece of land, so it effectively made like a little island.
Okay.
And I used to have all of my little GI Joe figures and the Jeeps and like the
Okay.
tanks and all of that stuff. And that little island became kind of my GI Joe battleground.
Wow. So that was your fault. Okay.
Yeah, that was kind of my thing. I think for me, because I grew up in the country, so I grew up about an hour 15 north of New York City, but where I grew up was very much up the Hudson Valley.
Uh-huh.
When I grew up, it was very much dairy farming and racing stables for Belmont and others. And so across the road from me was a dairy farm, and I used to work on that just about year round, milking cows and hay baling in the summer and all of that stuff. I worked on the stables next door. Um, Things like picking rocks from the field so the horses didn't stumble
Mm,
to mucking out stables and that sort of thing. So I kind of always grew up working, and I think that for me is it's been a defining characteristic of my career, is that I've always had a really strong work ethic,
mm,
uh, and I've also had a really heavy focus on delivering stuff, which is, I think, part of what sets me apart in terms of being what I kind of call a practitioner consultant
mm,
versus a kind of pure consultant who's only ever done consulting.
mm.
Um, for me, I've delivered a lot of things in my lifetime, and that kind of ethos I got when I was a kid really has carried through all the way through my career. So.
That again, that's a common theme. I mean, my partner, she's from farming stock, although she likes to say she is not a farmer's daughter. She's the daughter of a farmer. But it's a good distinction. She's the most girly girl I've ever met in my life, bless her. Which is great. But there is this. What's my point? With folks who, hesitating to use the word rural, but where you just have to get on, you have to do. Yeah. And there is no negotiation. There is no alternative. This is where you are. This is what you do, and execute. That is it. And I think that is. I mean, I'm traditional. Half of my family from farming stock, but out of Punjab, and that I'd like to think it was almost genetic.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
it's kind of like, yeah, if you don't do this, you don't eat. It's that simple, right? That house of cards is going to fall down pretty damn quickly. And marry that with the rigors and the discipline um, of engineering, which ironically actually gives you, I think, a little bit more flexibility than the diligence of pure farming. because then you're looking for constraints. You're not operating within constraints. You're looking for constraints. And okay, how can I break things? Right?
Yep.
Am I still making sense?
No, I mean, that does make sense. I mean, I was, certainly, I mean, interestingly, in my early engineering career, I was working with, when I was at Rochester Tel, for instance, I did a lot of work with Bell Laboratories. We were running trials, um, and one of the trials was around something called ADPCM, adaptive differential pulse code modulation, which was a way of multiplexing or combining lots of calls over a single line. And so I actually got involved in, because of the area that I was focused on at the company. I got involved in a bunch of R&D trials with Bell Laboratories as a partner and some of the Bell operating companies in the States. So kind of working on the cutting edge. And I think, like for me, coming out of uni, but also coming out of being a kid who grew up in the country, who had that kind of hardworking, can do, gonna get stuff done
Mm,
ethos.
mm,
Stepping into that environment of exploring the unknown, to me, it wasn't always just about exploring the unknown. It was about delivering something. It was about doing something. It was about reaching an outcome, right?
yeah, yeah.
So for me, it wasn't just some kind of airy fairy. I'm going away to just think a lot, and I'm not gonna ground it in something later. It was always, well, how can we do this? Maybe I had a slightly different kind of style or approach when I stepped into that space. That for me, it was like, what are we trying to achieve? What are the
Mm,
outcomes?
mm,
What are we aiming for? And so then it was a ton of problem solving along the way, just trying to figure out, okay, that didn't work. So what do we do? So it was a lot of experimentation and discovery in that space to do that. That carried that carried all the way into my digital career and everything that I have done in that
mm.
space ever since. So for me, it's always grounded. This is where I get. This might be a little controversial, but
No.
this is where I sometimes get a bit frustrated with in-house innovation teams,
Okay. Okay.
where I feel like a lot of them can be very disconnected from the reality of the organization, the reality of customers, the reality of things. You get a bunch of people, and I've seen this. I've worked with teams like this in the past, where you you see a lot of people who just go in and they're just, every day they're just like, oh yeah, we're going to do some stuff today. Well, what are you trying to achieve? Well, we're just going to do some stuff. Okay, well, how are you, are you talking with people at the really pointy delivery end of things who are engaging with customers where lots of problems are coming up and they're
Mm,
trying to solve for things? Are you sifting through any of that to try and figure out, how can we do things in a better way? And some of those things become, innovative ways to approach things, but innovation for innovation's sake, to me, in a lot of innovations teams, results in very little output.
mhm,
And so, some of the most innovative people, I mean, the most innovative people I've ever worked with were at BBN Technologies, where it was a company of scientists,
mm, mm,
doing a lot of governmental research. They were the team that built the packet switching network for ARPANET, which became the
mm,
internet. One of the guys there was the guy who put the @ symbol in email. This was a company that was just, everybody in the company had this DNA of problem solving, right? There's a problem. Okay, go off and try and figure out how to
mm,
fix it, how to
mm,
approach it. Um, so places like that I really resonate with, and I think because I worked in a place like that very early in my career, when I would then compare the culture there, to innovation teams inside a bank or other places, they were completely different to me. The real innovation to me existed in the fiber of the organization, not in a
mm.
team that sat on the sixth floor and
Hmm. Hidden
and
away.
and ran some experiments, yeah, and rarely engaged or interacted with anybody else in the business. So I just I guess I just have, and this probably gets back to my hard work ethos and delivery ethos and wanting to see something come from, people's efforts. It's things like that that I do question, and maybe I'm a little bit harsher about that than some people are, or a little bit more
Well,
outspoken. But
good, good. It's good to have, I think, um, hard edges as well as smooth edges. That always helps. And if it manifests itself in a specific area, then yeah, that might change again. Who knows,
yeah.
right? But I think certain places definitely need that. Um, there's a lot of purpose or alleged purpose going on without necessarily having any success criteria,
hmm Yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah, I
So yeah, we're
to,
doing innovation. To what end?
to what end? Well, what are you trying to achieve? What are the outcomes?
Yeah.
What problems are you solving? I mean, give me something in the space. At least let me know that there's a destination here at some point.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I guess I do. Those are things that I struggle with, but I probably it's probably not just innovation teams. It's probably people or teams who act in that way in organizations which is probably why I'm consulting and spending a lot of time in organizations working with teams and trying to rebaseline and improve how teams function. Um, because I want to see those teams, succeed. I want to see them have a purpose. I want people to feel like there's a culture in the
mm,
team, in
mm,
the
mm.
organization, and that they're able to go home at night saying, "Oh, I did that today."
It's so important.
Um,
It's so
yeah.
important, and
I
and
think we've
it's
lost some of that
difficult.
in digital. It used to be, this is going back 20, 25, 30 years. I mean, we used to do whole site redesigns, whole site relaunches,
Yeah.
right? And what did we do at the end? After we launched the site, we'd celebrate. You'd go out for drinks. The team would celebrate in some way. So teams
Hmm.
had those moments or points of celebration to look back on the work that they did, to reflect, to prop one another up, to feel like they've done something. Today, in an agile scrum based delivery world where you're delivering fragments and bits and pieces of things at speed, and a lot of people are questioning, is this the right stuff? Why are we doing this? How does
Hmm.
this support our customers, right? I don't think teams have enough points of celebration anymore. I don't think they have enough moments where they feel like they have that sense of accomplishment, that they've done something together. And so
Is that poor
teams lose.
leadership?
I think it's a mix of poor leadership. It's a factor of the models that we have deployed in organizations to deliver.
Mm,
I just put an article out on LinkedIn this morning about product teams, and I've got a I've basically got a 5 stage, it's not framework, but but a spectrum of product teams who wholly own the decisioning of what they do and what they don't do, all the way
mm.
through to product teams who have really become de facto delivery managers. They're really no longer product teams, and everything that sits in the middle. So I think part of what's happened, and part of what I address in that, is this sense of, when you've been in this field long enough and you've been doing this long enough, you see a lot of these cycles. And I've watched design go from,
Percent.
agency side to in-house. I watched in-house design start to climb that ladder to try and become more strategic.
Uh-huh.
I watched product come in. I watched agile come in and disrupt that journey. And I watched product, interpose itself between, the strategy and design and delivery. And now we're watching product slide right on the scale. We're watching product go from, something that was more strategic to becoming much more of a delivery function in a lot of organizations. Not all, but I've seen it now in so many organizations that it feels like there's a pattern, and it feels like it's part of a cycle of change.
Definitely,
Now, of
definitely.
course, what's going to replace it? Like what is going to sit in the gap between, strategy and delivery to interpolate what goes on in that space? Who's intermediating? Who's decisioning? All of that stuff. And I'm finding a lot of teams are, these days are just being told what to do. If they do discovery, it's a kind of focused, validated discovery around something that's already been pre-decided. Um, and I'm hearing a lot of people who are in the product design engineering space question, why are we doing this?
Uh-huh.
Why do they think this is a good thing? Why do they think our customers want this? I hear that over and over and over again now. And it concerns me that your product design and engineering teams are all asking those questions, because those teams should fundamentally know why. They should know why we're doing this. They should know what they're
So I've
delivering. They
I've
should
I've
the benefit is.
I've got a little theory that's formulating around it, and it will be brilliant to get your um, expert lens over this. So that is, I think, generated out of ambiguity. And I think the catalyst for this round of ambiguity is this glorious, glorious thing called artificial intelligence. And the powers that be simply haven't got a Scooby Doo, right? At a government level, at a governance level, at an operational level, everyone is literally fighting for some kind of fictitious land that they want to grab, but no one really understands what that land is just yet. Um, and because of that, your organizational structures aren't really doing what they could be doing, which means your operating models aren't really doing what they could be doing. And then so more, I don't want to say clever or smarter, but you've definitely got a quotient of individuals, regardless of discipline, who are kind of sitting back now and thinking, okay, interesting words. Why are we doing this? Going back to your purpose, and okay, what outcome are we aiming for based on what criteria? I'm going to stop there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, when you get boards telling exec teams, we want to know what your AI strategy is,
Mm,
and you get exec teams telling their leadership in house and their teams in house that we need to be AI enabled. We need to deliver AI. We need to use AI in our system. I mean, that's ambiguous. It means absolutely nothing, right? It's just buzzword bingo.
absolutely.
And and the funny thing is, like, with a lot of the surveys that are out that say, X percent of companies, are saying that they're using AI. When you go beneath the big number, what a high percentage of those companies are in fact saying is that, well, we have Gemini, we we have Copilot. That doesn't mean you're using it, you're doing anything with it, that you have defined a strategy. It just means that you have deployed some software that has AI enablement, right? But that doesn't make you an AI company. Um, and I think the thing is, there this goes back to design, right?
Mm,
So identifying problems to solve, identifying use cases, identifying opportunities and situations under which we we could incorporate AI tooling, generative AI, agentic AI,
uh-huh.
whatever it happens to be, creating an in-house LLM. I mean, I was thinking recently about, all the days that companies talked about having knowledge management systems, and then, how terribly those went, because knowledge management systems require upkeep, and they require structure, and they require information architecture, a lot of which has fallen by the wayside over the years.
Uh-huh.
And what you end up with is you end up with a system that has a lot of content in it that is unstructured, that nobody can find,
Dirty data.
that doesn't really add any value to the organization. Whereas if you built an in-house LLM, for instance, and you had a way of ingesting your organizational research and content, documents that you prepare, all of that stuff into the system. If you had some nomenclature around saying, what you believe is relevant, so have some kind of scaling system where you can say this is highly relevant to this is very low, in terms of relevance, or
Uh-huh.
this is current versus this is outdated, or, publishing dates, things like that. You potentially start to create something in-house that everybody can query, that connects everybody together. Everybody's content goes into that system, and it's a lot easier to engage with than something that somebody needs to manage. Now, you would still have to have somebody that sits across it to keep it honest, because we all know there's a lot of drift in
Uh-huh.
AI. And so there's got to be maintenance of that system, but that's a use for it. Looking at processes and workflow in house. This is something that organizations always deprioritize. They you know they they know that they've got poor processes in house. They know that they've got poor workflow in house. They don't really want to expend any effort, any time, any money on fixing it, because they're just about, well, just keep delivering stuff, just keep moving at pace, right? Let's have pace, 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 pace. What have you delivered, right? Now the problem with dumping AI into a system like that, agentic AI, is that you are effectively accelerating bad processes and bad workflow, which means you're accelerating poor decisioning and poor outcomes. And so you're only going to deliver crap work faster, in those systems. I've been using for my publishing business, I've been using a lot of agentic AI, but I've sat down and identified use cases. I've redefined and redesigned the workflow from
Uh,
scratch.
uh.
And then I've looked at how best to utilize the tooling to automate processes, which has saved me a phenomenal amount of time.
Because
Gives me back a lot of
you are
writing time.
accountable. You are accountable for oversight.
Yeah, and also I maintain it. I recognize that there is drift, and so I periodically, about every 2 weeks, I do a review of what the outputs are,
Uh,
and then I make corrections. I've seen businesses implement agentic AI processes, and then move on to the next one. And I mean,
oh dear.
if that thing is still producing value 3 months from now, I'd be surprised. Um, it's so there's a lot of thinking and a lot of work and a lot of strategy and a lot of design that needs to go into how organizations um, approach artificial intelligence and what they do
Uh-huh.
with it and what they mean by it. And I just don't think that level of thinking exists in a lot of places. I think I think it's still buzzword bingo to a lot of people.
I couldn't. There's nothing in all of that that I could even contest. It's just yes, 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 and yes. I mean, the more new stuff occurs, the more exposure I get to different sizes of organizations and different sectors and everything else that comes with what we do. The more grateful I am to the absolute geniuses who came out with human-centered design. Um,
Mhm.
because all of these observations that you've just made, there's already a very, very healthy, thank you, and reliable and proven set of things that can be done, but they're all around human-centered design.
Mhm.
Um, and I think as a collective, designers, and I've said this a lot publicly and privately and whatever, yeah, we shot ourselves in both feet with an elephant gun, decades ago. Um, and this is such a gilt-edged opportunity, and this being artificial intelligence and what it is showcasing, um, that the more senior practitioners, right? And I'm just going to go with that for now. And apologies to everybody else. Um, they're the ones who actually do the parallel processing. Folks like yourself, and thankfully lots of other people as well who can see the bigger picture, who can understand that this is very, very cyclic. That okay, what is your purpose, folks? What is your reason for being? What is the outcomes that you're looking to achieve? Because we've done this.
Yeah.
We've done this at a task level. We've done this at a product level. We do it at an organizational level. We can help you here,
Well,
right?
and we've watched it, in terms of digital, we've watched it blow up and bust, right?
Yep.
So, we saw and lived through all the hysteria. I mean, I remember during the boom days in the 90s, the I remember I was working for an agency in Boston, and uh I mean, we were getting work from, VCs who were funding things like building uh, the drugstore for South America at the time
Mm.
in the 90s, in the
Mhm.
mid to late 90s. And they were throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at building this large e-commerce platform effectively to sell aspirin, to sell band-aids, to sell, all of these common things that you would get in any
Over the
drugstores,
counter
in
drugstore.
any,
Yeah, yeah.
in any
Chemists.
town.
Mm.
And without even ever thinking about what was the internet penetration of South America in the mid 90s. It was pretty low. And and the buying patterns of people in South America were not to go online to buy aspirin and band-aids and, things like vitamins and things like that. It was literally to shop hyper local, and there was no experience of doing this. So, I mean, lots of money went into stuff like this, and then the bust happened, and a lot of that stuff, the common sense came in. And and then, we are where we are today. But I watch AI, and I'm seeing similar patterns of hysteria
Mm.
around it, and I don't know. I can't say for certain there's going to be a bust, right? But I do feel like there's going to be a correction of some sort.
Yes, there will
There's
be.
there's there's going to have to be some kind of shift, some kind of correction, and I feel like we're already seeing elements and signs of it, because the number of companies who threw themselves into into it, used it as an excuse, in my opinion, for making redundancies, who then, some number of months later go back out and rehire teams at a higher rate than they
Mhm.
were paying before.
Mhm.
Who have had to backtrack because they were finding that the cost of, tokens was too high. Companies, I think, was it Airbnb, or one of the companies was talking about how they spent their entire year's budget of tokens by March.
Mm.
So you end up with a lot of people, and this is just a sign of the hysteria. It's people jumping in without looking, people having no plan, no strategy, no vision, no idea of what they're doing. But I don't think that's just about AI. I think that's a sign of the time we're in at the moment. I think that, the we've lived in an era of populist politics, of war, of economic downturn. There's been a lot of stuff going on systemically that has impacted individuals and organizations globally. And I think what that's done is that's caused organizations who used to have 5 to 10 year plans go, you know, down to 3 to 5 year plans, down to 1 to 3 year plans, down to, 12-month plans, down to what are we doing this week, next week, this
Mm.
this month, this quarter.
Mm.
And to me, we've gone from this kind of macro level view of things, where we were taking a big picture view, we were taking a step back, we were creating a vision and a strategy, and we were saying that it's going to take us time to get there. So go on the journey with us. To our revenue, we didn't hit our revenue target last Tuesday. So get the team together. What are we going to do about it this week to try and make up for what we lost last Tuesday? Right.
Mhm.
And I'm seeing even that. I mean, that's not even a made up example. That is an example I have seen in organizations I've worked with, where the CEO has done that. And and it worries me that when you live in that kind of, fast paced, short termist kind of environment, and you've got your teams not surprisingly saying, why are we doing this? Why are we
Mhm.
doing this? Who is this going to benefit? Right? There's and then throw AI into the mix because that environment already existed before AI, and now
Yeah.
throw AI into that. And, you know, I just think that, it's a massive collision of things at the moment, of systems.
Um, Again, 100%. I mean, there's this phrase I've been using quite a bit now. It's like, fix your house before you start thinking about decorating it with AI. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think that's gonna take bigger change for a lot of companies at the moment
completely,
because
completely.
as I said, it's not just about AI. This is about who they've become over the past 5 to 10 years, right? And it's gonna take leaders and their boards backing them, right? And their shareholders backing them to say, actually, we're going to give you the breathing room and the space to think about this. We're going to give you the time, right? I mean, I almost feel like in some instances, I mean, look at the turnover in prime ministers in the UK.
Uh-huh.
I made a joke the other day about it. The leadership of the UK is beginning to feel like, management of Chelsea. You your leader comes in, does 2 games, doesn't perform in 2 games, and they're sacked and bring somebody else in.
Uh-huh.
We've gotten into that really fast-paced, rapid turnaround. It's almost like the fast foodism of how we run businesses, of how we run governments. And you cannot run big, complex organizations in that way, right? I mean, maybe you can run a 3 to 5 person startup in that way, and you
They've
can
always been
shift in.
run that way.
Yeah, I mean, you can shift and change focus in an hour, right? But when you're 50,000 people, operating at that speed, you cannot operate an organization that complex, that big, with that much reach, that many products or services at that pace. It
And
just
it
can't
doesn't matter
happen.
how much they call it simplification, it's consolidation, regardless of how much consolidation you're doing, and in particular, bringing in what were very robust disciplines and mashing them together and say, well, you're all going to be this new thing. You're all going to be unicorns. It's like that in theory, okay, but even then you are going to have splinter groups because people have DNA, people have preferences, right? And I'm not going to be, I don't know, a transformational change person, and then on Monday, and then by Friday, okay, yeah, I'm going to be a designer plus a business analyst. It will not work.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna
Okay.
be a develop then I'm gonna be a developer on Tuesday, and I'm gonna be creating, agentic AI flows on Wednesday or Thursday. I mean, people need a bit of direction, they need a bit of foundation, they need a bit of belief and trust in the organizations, that the organizations are making the right decisions and doing the right things. I
And they,
think a lot of that
yeah,
trust is fallen,
yes.
and organizations that are getting really bad, you know um employee uh employee engagement scores,
Mm.
sit there and question, well, what are we doing wrong? Well, I mean, apart from everything, um you're not operating in a responsible way anymore. You've kind of abdicated that. And all these organizations have accrued, in my view, so much design debt, tech debt, process and workflow debt, product debt, service
Yep.
debt. It has stacked up, and I almost feel like it's become such an eye-watering problem inside most organizations that nobody knows what to do with it. It's
But this
become
is
too
this
big.
is the thing, right? And this is one of the brilliant things, and I'm not understating that. I hope that artificial intelligence has arrived to do. It's kind of like a pH indicator for ecosystems. You know, Wh- we're now going to because it just accelerates everything.
Well, it's gonna move a lot of those companies quite who aren't set up for it, who haven't rebaselined in the right way. It's gonna move them quite rapidly towards the precipice of failure, right?
Yes. Yes.
And all it's gonna take is a few notable failures in that space for people to look up and say, "We need to do something about this," right? And this to me is that dot-com boom bust moment, right?
Oh,
It's
yes.
that paradigm shift. It's that correction in the way we're doing things. Whatever form it takes, something has got to happen because something is going to happen in that space that is going to force a change. And,
It's the
I
financials, like it or not, from my perspective, that are gonna be the key indicators for that. What's
yeah.
my return on investment? I've just invested all of this in, I don't know, the token economy. Oh dear. So much for that budget. Okay. And that unit cost is not going to depreciate. That commodity is going. It is continuously, from what I can see, be, going to be getting more expensive.
Well, it's gonna get more expensive because nobody's making money at the moment on it.
Yeah,
It's all VC investment that's propping it up. And, the cost of tokens is going to, they're gonna tier it in such a way that the cost of tokens for organizations to operate at an enterprise level are going to be so expensive that you can't afford to not have a strategy, to not have a vision, to not have a plan, to not rebaseline, to not design things in the right way, because you're going to be spending so much money on the cost of AI in that space, getting it wrong, that with nothing to show for it at the end of the day. Um, that it's gonna put some companies out of business. I mean, some of the companies that are receiving invoices now are receiving these eye-wateringly high
uh-huh.
cost invoices, that they hadn't planned for, they hadn't budgeted for, because they had no plan and they threw their teams at it and said, "Just do stuff," right? I mean, that's gonna cost money. The part of the problem too is that token cost is always is one of those things that you only know after you've done something, right? So you have to run it to see what the token expenditure is going to be, and by the time you've run it, you've expended the token.
It's a
So
betting slip. It's a betting slip.
it is completely. So if you don't have a plan for it and you don't have a means of um, dealing with it, then then you're absolutely going to fall into a pit of despair in terms of engaging with AI, because it's going to impact and affect everything that your organization is doing in a negative way. Um, I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go, but it's a bit it's a bit like watching a car, a reckless kid driving a car down the road, a residential road 90 miles an hour. You're not quite sure what's gonna happen, but you're pretty sure that it's not gonna be
This
good, whatever it is.
this is not going to end well, as we used to say.
So,
Brian,
I don't
Brian,
know.
Brian, look, we've been yapping for over the hour now, and it's it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much. Um, appreciate how incredibly busy you are. But is there anything that you particularly wanted to share today, before we get into, I guess, how can people reach out to you? Um, yeah. So first of all, is there anything at all that we haven't touched on that you were kind of thinking, you know what, I really wanted to talk about that.
No, I mean, I think we've covered uh, a good range of topics.
Good, good, good,
So,
good.
yeah, yeah, I'm
Awesome.
good.
So over to you, sir. How can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is just to look me up on LinkedIn. Um, they can always drop me an email. My email is open, so it's brian@brianhodley.com. and I'm happy for that to be out there. Um, the uh, I don't do apart from LinkedIn, I don't really do work socials. Um, and all of my other social stuff is author related. So yeah, I mean they can look me up on Amazon as well as B Scott Hodley is my nom de plume for my books. But yeah, those are the ways to get in touch with me, I'd say.
Fantastic. Brian, once again, thank you so much. Like I said, it's been an absolute joy.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Thanks for having me.